We'll be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for inviting me to describe the UK's experience of cap-and-trade programmes. I head the International Emissions Trading Branch at the UK Department of Environment, and I've worked on emissions trading programmes since 2003, both on the UK's voluntary programme and as policy lead developing the UK's allocation plan for the second phase of the EU programme. My current responsibility is to help extend cap-and-trade programmes beyond the EU, whilst allowing others to learn lessons from the EU experience. To give some context, in the UK, all major political parties accept the science of climate change, and climate change mitigation is therefore not a contentious issue, only insofar as how we go about it and how far we go, how quickly. Emissions trading is the central plank, but not the only measure to mitigate climate change in the UK government's portfolio of measures. It's favoured because it guarantees an environmental outcome through the cap, and it maximises the incentives to reduce emissions at least cost through the flexibility to buy and sell allowances. Turning to the EU programme, the first phase of the EU programme, that runs from 2005 to 2007, was designed as a learning phase to ensure that when we got to the first Kyoto period, we had a successful, fully implemented scheme up and running. It was necessary to have this learning phase in order to collect verified emissions data, and many of the facilities covered by the programme did not collect emissions data up until that point. To put in place the institutional framework that's required for a cap-and-trade programme, so the registries, the electronic registries that monitor the holdings, track the holdings of emissions allowances and allow electronic surrender of those allowances, the monitoring and reporting protocols, the verification, and not least to gain experience of trading. Our experience in the UK voluntary programme is that sometimes it takes a couple of years for trading to really get going, and I think that was the experience in the SO2 programme in the US. And so it was important to have this 3-year period to get trading underway and for participants to understand how they could benefit from this programme. What Phase 1 has done is provide a very good basis for Member States and for the European Commission to develop and assess their plans for Phase 2. And that's a process that's currently underway, with the Commission assessing to date 17 of the 27 plans for the second phase of the EU programme. And I've included in my written testimony the summary of those allocation plans, the allowances that will be issued for those member states, and I think that they demonstrate both the Commission's determination to ensure real scarcity in Phase 2 of the programme, and also member states' determination to learn from the 2005 emissions data that they now have. As an example, Germany initially proposed an annual cap in Phase 2 of 482 million allowances, and that's now been cut back to 453 million allowances, whilst increasing the emissions that it covers. And Spain has set its Phase 2 cap at 16.5% below its 2005 verified emissions. The UK, indeed, has set its Phase 2 cap at 13% below 2005 verified emissions. And in doing so, we had a number of considerations. Firstly, the environmental impact of the scheme, but also the impact on electricity prices and the competitiveness of UK industry. And I know there's been some discussion of electricity prices, but our assessment for Phase 2 in setting the cap for UK industry at that level was that, in a central case, electricity prices would rise by 1% for industrial users and by 0.5% for domestic users. We have learned some real lessons from Phase 1 of the EU programme. Firstly, the most important lesson is that markets need real scarcity, but also that in order to ensure that scarcity, you need very good data. And what Phase 1 has done is provide us with verified emissions data for many of those facilities for the first time. We have also learnt that you need more harmonisation of rules and allocation processes to mitigate against competitive distortions that may happen intrastate, and to make sure that we're undertaking as fairly as possible the effort that we do. Industry, we also know, needs certainty on targets and framework to make sure that it makes the low-carbon investments that we want it to do. And the European Union has recently announced its 2020 target to cut emissions by 20% below 1990 levels. But we have also done some really good things in phase one. We've put the institutions in place, and it was often quite a painful process in which to do so, but those registries, those allocation methodologies, the monitoring reporting protocols, and trading is happening. Point Carbon, the market analysis and news service for the carbon market, estimates that 1 billion tonnes were traded in the EU programme in 2006, and that 1 billion tonnes was worth around 18 billion euros. There is still a positive carbon price. The phase one price is very low. The phase two price is currently around 17 euros a tonne, and that has been reasonably steady over the past few months. Lastly, the UK government retains its commitment to cap and trade as the most cost-effective way of achieving the emissions reductions we need to avoid catastrophic climate change. And I'll be very happy to answer your specific questions later.
Thank you very much, Ms. Duggan. Dr.